Welcome to this Frequency Matters podcast. I'm Pat Hindle, and I'm here with my co-host Del Pierson. And today we're talking with Shola Efunshile, COO of Univity. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi there. Thank you very much for having me.
Univity is developing a shared, neutral, and fully independent space infrastructure that enables telecom operators worldwide to deploy high-speed, low-latency internet access from space, and this will complement terrestrial networks. And its constellation operates in the very low Earth orbit using telecom operators' 5G millimeter wave spectrum to deliver competitive performance. So I was wondering if you could tell us about the project goals and how you're proceeding on those so far.
Yep, absolutely. So our aim, our company mission, and the aim of this project is to enable the traditional telecommunications operators to be able to provide high performance, affordable, and sustainable internet connectivity to their customers wherever they are around the world. So what we're seeing at the moment is most of us, we have access to internet via fiber and 5G on our mobile phones, but that's unfortunately still not the case for many people around the planet. We're aiming to provide a solution that will help to provide internet connectivity to those underserved zones. So the terrestrial operators at the moment today are seeing competition coming from other mega constellations who are selling directly to their customers. What our solution will do is allow those operators to integrate our system with their current offerings and to offer their customers that same exact performance without having to switch to a different operator.
Awesome. And the constellation will operate in very low Earth orbit. How is that different from LEO, and what are the advantages of that?
So LEO orbit is typically everything under around 1,200 miles. The very low Earth orbit is the very bottom of that. So we're talking about everything sort of a lot lower than that, under about 250 miles. So the main advantage, the first technological advantage we see is the lower latency. That's the time it takes for the signal to get between the planet and the satellites and back again. So this means that people can communicate faster. We can do things in a lot more real time. You can play video games across the internet via satellite in a way that we can't with the traditional geostationary satellites, where you've got to allow full seconds for that signal to get to the Earth and back. So another advantage of that orbit is it's what we call self-cleaning, because it's lower, closer to the Earth, and there is some residual atmosphere. Satellites that we lose for whatever reason, we've lost their control, they've failed, or they've come to the end of their lives, without us having to do anything to them, they will deorbit themselves within, yes, less than a year. So that's again a difference to the higher orbits, where if we lose a satellite for whatever reason, some of those satellites can stay and have stayed in orbit for decades. So that minimizes the risk of congesting the orbits and generating space debris.
Yeah, so you mentioned that this altitude allows for design the built-in environmental accountability. Can you tell us about that more, about how it will just self-disintegrate in, you say, less than a year?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great feature that we're able to integrate into our system. So we have propulsion on board the satellites to help with station keeping, and when they come to their natural end of life, we will be using that to deorbit the satellites. But the extra kind of added bonus of that orbit is if for whatever reason we're not able to do that, we won't be leaving satellites up in orbit for decades, which means there's no congestion, and the risk of collisions between satellites is a lot lower because we just will have less junk up there. So the other feature of that orbit actually is that it reduces the light pollution. So we've seen with some satellites that there's been a phenomenon where radio astronomers are trying to observe the stars and they've got satellites flying across the field of view. So it's a bit counterintuitive, but actually the closer you are to the planet, the less effect that is, because there is less time where the sun's light is reflected down to Earth. So that's another advantage of that orbit, and it means that we're able to develop a system that's allowing people to connect and to have connectivity, participate in this global world, but also respecting other users and respecting the limited resources that we have in space.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. And going back to the space junk, kind of in being able to deorbit those satellites, how much space junk is up there? And you mentioned some of the risks, but can you talk more about those?
Yes, for sure. So the latest information from the European Space Agency estimates that there's a sort of over 50,000 bits of space junk that are over 10 centimeters in size. And when you're looking at the smaller elements, which are obviously harder to track, we're talking about sort of hundreds of millions of objects up there that could potentially collide with satellites, cause collisions, and generate further debris, what we call the Kessler effect. So it's something that there's still a lot of space up there. Fortunately, space is very big, but it's something that we cannot take for granted. We have to be responsible when we're putting things in orbit, look at ways to make sure that the collision risk is minimized, that we can bring them down when they're not functioning. And that's something that's absolutely at the heart of our project.
And so you're using 5G millimeter wave technology. Is that 5G NTN or is it some other form of standard?
Yes and no, I would say. So it is 5G. It's based very heavily on the existing 5G NTN standards. The main difference is the frequencies that we're using. So typically the traditional 5G NTN is sort of uplinking at 30 gigahertz, coming down at around 17, 18. We're operating at the 5G millimeter wave around 25 gigahertz. So we're using a lot of the same standards, adapting it where we need to. But the advantage of using those frequencies is that there's a lot of bandwidth available. So lots of traditional systems are already operating at that kind of Ka band frequencies that I mentioned originally. This is the 25 gigahertz spectrum that we're using is not very used for space at the moment. So there's a lot of bandwidth there, which means we can provide high capacity. It also has the advantages that the telecom operators already have the rights to this. So we don't have to do individual filings to get the rights to operate our satellites. We have to coordinate with the operators, but it's frequencies that they already own and that already can operate in. It means that there are terrestrial components, microwave components already available that we use in our telephones. So it means that we can use those components to make sure our ground terminals are as low a cost as possible because we don't have to develop new ones.
Are there any disadvantages to the very low Earth orbit? I'm wondering why people haven't used it before.
Yeah, there's some technical challenges with it. So one thing I mentioned is that there is some residual atmosphere. So it's technically space, but there is a little bit of atmosphere. And that means that if we don't do anything to the satellites, that they will because of the air drag, they will disorbit. So we do need some propulsion on board to keep them in place. So that's one of the challenges. And aerodynamically, it's something that we don't have to deal with at all when you're in the higher orbits. So that's something that, we're developing some technologies. We've got some patents already in place for technologies that we're developing and using for our satellites to make sure they can operate in that atmosphere. There's also some atomic oxygen, which you don't get at the higher altitudes, which is another element that we have to make sure we're protecting our systems from.
And so you mentioned that you're using some COTS products that are already available. So I'm guessing that's part of it, but how will it deliver low latency at a low cost?
Exactly, that's all part of the strategy. So that low latency is inherent in that very low Earth orbit. The components that we can use are already mass produced for the mobile phone industry. So there are already manufacturers out there that are producing these components at high volumes, and we hope to be able to, we will be integrating those into our systems. In order for the whole system and business model and the vision to work, the ground terminals have to be as low cost as possible. We want this system to be accessible really to everybody around the planet, and that can't happen if the terminals are not at an achievable price point for the majority of people. So that was part of the choice of using those frequencies, was knowing that we could get components available, mass produced quickly and at a low cost.
And so, how does Univity's model address both digital inclusion and infrastructure resilience?
So the digital inclusion, as I said, it's part of our entire mission of the company, that we want to allow as many people as possible to have internet connectivity. So we're seeing today it's kind of a vital resource, almost like having electricity. We also need to have internet. It means people can contact each other in emergencies. It means we can have knowledge. It allows, for example, doctors to be able to talk to their patients when they're not nearby. And that's what we want to allow, that everywhere around the planet that is a real possibility. And in terms of the infrastructure resilience, so within our system, at least we're designing it such that anywhere around the planet, a user terminal will have visibility of at least two satellites. So if for one reason we lose one of our satellites, there'll always be another one that's visible. We also have inter-satellite links between all of them, so we can skip over satellites and make sure that we can connect everybody.
Awesome. And what future directions do you see for the technologies being used for Univity?
That's a great question because as I said, there are some unique challenges with this system, and it's a huge adventure that we're on. We're developing the elements that are going to go into space as well as the ground terminals. So we've got lots of different technology. As I said, the technologies to keep the satellites up in space in very low Earth orbit. We've got some 5G developments that are going on to adapt the 5G stacks to our system. Some sort of digital RF innovations going on in the payloads to make sure that we can reroute the traffic as quickly and as flexibly as possible. It's really exciting stuff. I'm really pleased to be a part of it. So at the moment, we just launched our first proof of concept a few weeks ago, and we're just beginning testing on that now. So with that first satellite, we're going to be demonstrating that our 5G software does work, and we'll be also demonstrating some of the antenna technologies that we've got on the ground. Then we'll be working with telecommunications operators. We've got some agreements with several of them to do testing with this system so that we can demonstrate to them that our system will work with theirs and it's not going to interfere and it can really add value to their offering. After that, then we're working on the development of our next two demonstrators. So we'll be launching two satellites that will be a lot larger and more representative of that final system. And we'll do end-to-end testing with that, along with the ground terminals that we're developing in parallel. So that will be the first sort of real test of the performance and the capabilities that we want to offer. So that's planned for 2027. After that, we'll begin deploying the full constellation in 2028. So we're talking about 1,500 satellites in VLEO, about 1,200 gateway terminals that we'll be deploying around the planet to connect those satellites to the internet, and then as many user terminals as it takes to allow those operators to connect their customers to our system. So then we'll be looking to provide first commercial service in as early as 2028. So there's a lot planned, a lot to do, a lot's coming, and it's exciting times.
I just like that you said they're aerodynamic, so I think you're probably going to have the coolest looking satellites out there.
That is possible.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing with us. And that's right around the corner. Somehow 2028 is coming up quick. So thank you for talking with us today about Univity Network and how it will enable low cost and low latency connections, along with being environmentally conscious. Please keep us up to date on your future progress. To our
Absolutely,
audience,
pleasure.
thank you. To our audience, you can find more podcasts at podcasts.microwavejournal.com and give us a like. Thank you for listening.